Hey everyone, welcome to this first edition of the Beyond Distance podcast. I'm Timothy, and I'm here with a friend and fellow colleague of mine, William. In this first edition, we dive into a whole range of topics, going from overscoping, environmental storytelling, personal work, and more. So there should be something interesting for each and one of you. Let's dive into it.
Go.
First of all, how have you been, man?
I'm doing all right. We're all in the same situation at home, and got to make the best of it, and that's what I've been trying to do. I'm really looking forward to having this week off, just
Yeah.
chilling, and yeah, I've just been spending it mostly playing video games, cooking, doing all that stuff. And yeah, I'll see. I'm hoping kind of that because I'm not working, I might, I might get that itch again to start doing some personal stuff. Because for some reason that's not been happening a lot lately.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because you
I
were
hope
working on that street scene for a while.
Yeah, I'm still on that. I'm the thing for me is I've noticed that before is I always have these phases where I'll work on my personal projects for I don't know, like 2 or 3 months, like nonstop. I'll get off work and I'll work on my personal stuff for like 3, 4, or 5 more hours, and then I'll have these downs where I'll come home and I'm like, yeah, I'm exhausted. I just want to, I don't know,
Chill out. Yeah.
lay in bed, yeah, put on some Netflix or something. So that's the thing. For me, it's always this. I don't know this.
It's
like
like
a, what is it?
you're doing constantly. You're sprinting constantly, basically.
Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah, I'm not the type of guy who's like, I've worked on my personal project for every single day at least an hour. Like I know that's what some people do. That they say, okay, I need to do it for at least an hour every day. I personally, my philosophy for that is, if I want to do it, I'll do it, and then it'll be good. And if I force myself to do it, then it's probably not going to be the result that I want anyway.
Yeah.
So and also the thing is, some people they need to work on their portfolio because they need to get a job.
Yeah.
And
But you're
yeah,
already in that stable situation, so you kind of don't feel that pressure
Yeah.
anymore of like working for your portfolio and then getting the next job or whatever.
exactly. For me, it's like if I really want to, I'll spend a weekend just working on the project for like nonstop, and it'll probably be a lot better than what I would have done if I would have said, okay, 2 hours every day for the week. Because then, I think it also has to do with me. It has to do at work. Like if I have like a little task that is just like easygoing, I'll be more open, let's say, for doing stuff at home because I'm not fully like, I don't know, my full capacities, and you know what I mean. Like I still have some creative juices left to work on some stuff at home, and then if I'm doing something like super not like taxing, but just something that requires you to be more put all your into it, then at home I'll just be I'm done. Which I mean, yeah, that's just how it is sometimes.
Yeah, it's really tricky, man. Like when I think back, like a couple of years back, when I was getting to in personal projects, there were these moments where I was just like, okay, this weekend is gonna be nothing but personal projects, and then the next weekend would be nothing. I would just be chilling out. But then after a while, I just felt like the pauses in between were getting longer and longer. And then I kind of lost interest in the project. And then I was like, oh, I kind of want to do this now. And it was kind of, I was getting distracted with other stuff that I really wanted to do.
That's a huge one for me as well.
Yeah, so I never got to that point back then when I just sat down like every day and did like, I don't know, half an hour to an hour just working on the project. And yeah, sort of moving from just doing the sprints like you mentioned and turning it into like a marathon where it's more thinking about like the long term and like building like a proper plan and like separating it into like smaller chunks that basically turn into those smaller projects.
I mean, that's the thing for you as well, right? Because how long have you had your blog? Because that's something that you have to constantly work for. Say,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
doing this for a week, right? So that's another thing why you kind of have to do that marathon type of work for that, right? You
yeah.
can never just stop.
It's kind of weird because the overall thing is a marathon for sure, but then like from week to week, sometimes it really turns into sprints where I'm like, oh, the blog needs to be out like in 2 hours, and I just come home and I'm just like, oh, I can't do the cooking. You'll have to do that today. I'll have to work on the blog.
That's a good excuse.
Yeah, but I love I love cooking though.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's kind of like, oh shit, I'm cutting into my own relaxation time in some way.
Yeah,
Uh,
that is the thing. Right now, because I don't have that kind of like regular thing, like I don't have a deadline for my personal projects, right? It's just for me.
yeah,
So that's why I force myself sometimes to just say, this is my time now, you know? I mean, and that's the thing. Sometimes it'll just be like I'll play with my friends, and then after I'll be like, okay, now I just really want to work on my own thing. And then if it kind of flows naturally, if I don't force it, then it's all going to be higher quality. It's going to be better. And for me, it also just doesn't work to be like, okay, I'm going to do half an hour on my project, because then I don't get stuff done. I
yeah,
have
yeah.
to be working on it for a couple hours, and then I really get into it, and then I become really fast. But if in half an hour I don't really like wind up to do my like good work or
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah, like in the beginning, half an hour was fine, but then I quickly came to that point when it's like, oh, I want to do more. But that's the whole thing about just doing it for like half an hour or even like 15 minutes. Like it's supposed
Hmm.
to get you in a mentality where you're used to working on it every day, and then over a certain period of time, you're gonna extend that time from like 15 minutes to like an hour, and then maybe 2 hours, and then it's like
Yeah.
you have these really specific time blocks in your day where you're just like, look, from this time to this time I'm going to be working on my project, and then I can still do
Hmm.
anything else at the end
Yeah.
of it. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that everyone thinks that I'm like this super organized monster. I'm not. I keep telling about like these time blocks, but for me, like it's more about the habit itself. So there are
Yeah.
moments, there are times in the day, or like say certain weekends when I'm like, I don't want to work now, and then I'll get working at around like 11 or something, like
Mm.
really late.
Oh, I did that a couple. Oh, man, when I was working on my I made a Winchester gun, right? The Winchester
Yeah,
1895.
yeah,
Um, that happened to me a couple times. That I was like, I was just done, like I don't know, watching a movie. Let's say, I was like, oh, now okay, I could really get into some 3D, and I would start at, like you said, like 11:30,
oh man,
and then I'd be just up until like 5 in the morning, and you're like at 3 you're like you finish your low poly, and you're like, well, now I only need to rename everything, and then I can see the bake, and then
no,
you do that, and then it's 3:45, and you're like, oh, but there's a little like baking error here. I need to fix this cage. I need to do this. Then you do it, and then you've baked it, and you're like, well, now I might as well put it in Substance, see what it looks like, you know.
yeah, and then you see
And
the
then you
sun coming
start,
up, and it's like, maybe I should really get to sleep.
yeah, you start like, I mean, now that I've got it in Substance, I might as well put some like basic materials on it, you know. It's so
Yeah,
weird.
it's just this never-ending cycle.
Yeah, you get into this loop where you're just, there's always something that you finished, and
Yeah,
you're like, okay, I'm only gonna finish this, and then you're like, but now that I've finished this, I might as well, you know.
yeah,
That's always what I
but
tell myself. It's always like, yeah, I might as well.
yeah, but on the other side, there's also those things in the pipeline where you're just like, oh, I don't want to do it. And then even if you're in the flow, like for me, it might be detailing some models in like bigger environments because I know that is such a long step because I have so many things blocked out and already in the environment that step is just super long.
Mm.
And when I get to it, even if I'm in the flow, I'm just like, oh man, I don't really want to do this. And then you see like the procrastination come in and be like, you're kind of
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
stuff, but it's not really amounting to anything. And then the next day you look at it and you're like, oh, what the fuck was I doing? Like,
You mean these days where you're just like spending 45 minutes rotating your model, and you're looking at it, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what this looks like, and you're just
yeah,
not.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yep.
had that. I was working on a bike for my scene,
Mm.
and I really like hard surface modeling and stuff. But for a bike, it's not that it's cool shapes. It's just like bars and cylinders,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's not hard to model per se. But you have to think of you have to think of the little brake with the braking cable going somewhere, and do all the spokes of the wheel and stuff like that, and that can become like a little bit. Uh, yeah, it's not hard work. It's more like
It's
work you have to
tedious.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tedious, exactly. And then you're just sitting there, and you're like, oh, I'd rather do some cool, different model or texture something cool. And then
Mm.
yeah, so that's the thing. Sometimes you just have something that you're like, I don't know. Maybe I'll do it some other time.
Yeah.
Then you
This
start
is
moving on to other things.
Yeah, it's exactly that point that also makes me super hesitant to record my progress because
Mm.
I am not clean. Like my process is not clean, especially when I'm doing personal work. Like I would love to show you some screenshots sometime of like my progress from the forest scene that I made because that thing started out as like, oh, I want to make a medieval scene. And
Yeah,
I started building cobblestone textures and like house block outs, and then I was like, oh, I want to make some grass, and I was like, oh, I'm really interested into grass, and then I made some ferns, and then it's like, oh, I don't want to do the medieval scene anymore. I'm gonna morph this into something else, and
yeah,
then I scrapped
totally.
that scene like 3 times because I just couldn't find the right fit for it. There were some moments when I was experimenting with like some alien shapes, like it would be like a crashed alien spaceship, like in the middle of a forest or something.
Nice,
And
nice, man.
it's just I still have all the screenshots. It would be super interesting to share them actually. But yeah, like
Yeah,
that is my workflow. I don't think like a lot of what people put out on the internet is just like super clean. Like this is how you do it. This is like step by step, and everyone sort of feels like that is a standard way of doing stuff. But for a lot of people doing personal work, it's super dirty.
yeah, same. So for me, it's a lot of the time. So yeah, when I tell people, when people ask me, yeah, so how do I approach making an environment? I'm like, yeah, first of course you block out the whole scene, right, and then you start doing this, and then you bring all the props up to a quality level. But for me, a lot of the time it starts with one prop, let's say. So
Hmm.
or like a little test. A lot of my personal projects started out as some kind of test. So when I was working on my basement, for example, um, so I actually had some old props that I made. That was like a really long time ago when I was still in uni. I think like I don't know, when was that, like 2016, 2017 probably. I um I was working on a scene. It was like apocalyptic, and they moved to the sewers. Like I want to make like a base inside the sewers,
Of course, it's
and
apocalyptic.
yeah, of course, of course. I mean, that's everyone has at least one of those, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like,
That's my recent scene.
um, yeah, yeah. There you go. And yeah, because it's fun. You can add like a lot of wear and tear and cool like
Yeah, yeah.
build stuff. Yeah, and I made that, and that was I didn't know what I was doing back then. And then I was like, yeah, but some of these props are cool. So why don't I take some of something with them? And then I started doing a test for texture blending, like vertex painting in Unreal, and doing like having like different materials applied to the same mesh, and doing and having like layered. I wanted to think about how like surfaces work. Like for example, I made like a tile wall, and then you had some of the tiles were fallen off, and you could see like the what is that, like the mortar, like whatever it's called, like that's used to
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
attach tiles to the wall, right? And then behind that you had like brain about that. How can I make that work? And I made some tests with that, and then I was like, okay, I might as well take these props from this old scene I made. And then I started. I blocked out this scene that was kind of like a basement, but with a huge hole in the wall, as if there was like some kind of criminal gang living in this basement, and they were digging a tunnel for like I don't know, to like a bank vault or something.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. That was like I had like a huge map on the wall, and there was like this barrels full of soil that they had taken out of their hole. and there was like pickaxes and shovels. And then at some point I was like, this is getting out of hand. This is way too much to handle right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went into a completely different direction, and then I started thinking about, okay, maybe I'm just gonna make like a little homely basement with like a ping pong table and you know, like a little more like a family type home feel, and that's what I ended up doing, and I'm really happy I did that, because this way there's still a story it tells, maybe not like a poignant story like this is where people are digging a tunnel to rob something. It was more like these kinds of people live here, like
Yeah, it's
a
more
more subtle
subtle.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually more interesting, because anyone can just put a hole in the wall and put a shovel next to it, and then most of the people are going to understand that there's someone digging a tunnel. But if you do more like these subtle hints, I think it's a lot more interesting to be like, oh, this is the kind of people that live here. They have kids, or they don't, or they're into sports, or they're doing this, or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually a lot more interesting, and that's because that's how you can convey information to the player if you're working on a game, right? It's these subtle things that then, if you're, yeah, that they translate to the player, and then in the end they'll be like, oh, this kind of person lives here.
Yeah, but it's not for everyone to pick that up. It's like you said, it's
Yeah.
more subtle. Because I keep thinking back to a mentorship that I did with Tim Gross. He's one of my patrons, and it was really interesting when you were talking about like this you always want to overscope and like blowing shit up and like having this really in your face story basically. And I think um once you're once you're working to get into the industry, like it's one of those easier things to go for, because even if you're like just starting out and you're already, this is the first time that you're getting into like narrative storytelling,
Hmm.
and you have to tell such a really subtle story as your first story, like it's super hard to pull that off, because there's so many subtle things going on and everything has to be sort of lit in a specific way, where it's like if you if you have this light that's shining on the desk, then certain documents get revealed, and you have to have
Yeah,
like proper camera angles for that to support that, and it turns it again into like this overscoping of just like narrative ideas in this case.
yeah, you have to think about so many minute little details, and
Yeah.
they all come together. Yeah, that's. I think that's why it's for like a first scene. It can be. It's definitely important to not overscope, to be realistic in what you can achieve in a certain amount of time,
Hmm.
um, and then also just picking a theme that is, first of all, original, because that's how you're going to get attention, right?
Yeah.
um, Also something that you can convey without creating 1,000 assets. So
Hmm.
I on my while I was having like a Discord lesson with my with people on my Discord, I told them like, so how would you, for example, that an old person lives in an apartment? You do, you know, without creating 1,000 unique that. You know, maybe you have some older furniture lying around, you know, that you can use.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a start. But then maybe, you know, they don't have a huge flat screen TV. They've got like an older little TV.
Hmm.
Maybe they have a cane somewhere. You know, they have. I mean, the best example would be a little glass with some fake teeth
Yeah.
next to the bed. You know,
Oh yeah, that would
that's
be
great.
spot on
You
actually.
know,
Because I was thinking
or
about a wheelchair or something.
yeah, yeah, something like that, or like a rocking chair,
Yeah.
stuff that
Oh, a
like,
rocking chair could be better, because a wheelchair could also be for like disabled people, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's
and
all these different factors that come into play with like these elements.
yeah. What I was, what I don't remember who it was, but in some lesson at my uni, that kind of for some reason it really stuck with me, was that you can with doors, you can really convey some information with doors. So, for
Mm.
example, usually in people's homes, they either have their doors closed or open, and and only people that live with animals have doors that are like half open, because the cats or the dogs will like push the door open a little bit to get through, but they won't open it all the way.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
so that was something really interesting, I thought, because it's it's such a subtle detail, and you don't even need to create a new asset for it, right? You just need to take the door and make it like open like 30 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because that is true. Like I live alone. I don't have any doors open a little bit. Why would I? But when I had my dog over, it was exactly that thing. He would be like, I don't know, in the hallway. He would go through the door, open it just so he could get through, and then he wouldn't close it, obviously. So it's that kind of stuff. Thinking about that kind of stuff is really interesting to me. And I mean, that's the thing with lighting as well, right? You can convey such a feel of importance for a scene just by lighting. Like you said, there's stuff on a desk, or maybe there's, I don't know, they're lighting another side of the room, so maybe that's where they're spending their time.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
interesting to
like
think about.
we have so many tools at our disposal, and to be honest, like I'm already in the industry for like 5-6 years now. I keep
Yeah.
forgetting how long it is, but it's I'm even like trying to tackle some of the tools still, where it's like I know how color works, I know how lighting works, but then I know all of that stuff on like um I wouldn't say I have mastered those skills. I'm still learning those things. Where
Mm.
it's like why would you use like in my last scene, last bastion, like I specifically use like the rising of the sun to bring like the first glimmers of hope back into the scene. Like that was a
Mm.
deliberate thing. But then if you ask that to other people, they just see like, oh, it's the sun rising. Like
Yeah.
maybe they don't think about it that much. But like as an artist, you're thinking about all those things. And like there's like one light in that scene that is really overpowered compared to all the rest, because that was the light that was shining on the banner that had like the name of the location on it,
Mm.
because it was like an important narrative element in the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
it's
that's.
super interesting. I do want to go back to your point about overscoping as well,
Mm.
because I feel like that's really important. Um, but I also want to say that is it's tricky to master. Like even you naturally you're gonna get to some point in your scene where you're like, ooh, if I want to finish this to like the quality that I had imagined in the beginning, I'm gonna have to build it for like another year or whatever if I do
Yeah.
everything myself. And there are just
Yeah.
moments where you have to sit back, really look at your scene, and look at maybe you have multiple camera angles, maybe you have only one. Like that's already making a difference, because you can hide some stuff with only one camera angle. Or
And also,
maybe
yeah, if do I need 5 variations of this asset, or will
yeah.
one do to get the point across? Right. That's the thing. Sometimes because you're thinking about your scene a lot more than the people that are eventually gonna look at it most of the time, right?
Hmm.
Especially in games, people just fly through the environment. They don't look at what's going on around them.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, at least. So sometimes you do need to be like, I know it's important for me that there. Is it going to be as important for someone looking at this? And kind of evaluate what you really need and what's more like a cool thing that you kind of want, because it's interesting, it's cool.
Hmm. Yeah, it's also is that exact point why we try to hit the player over the head with stuff in games, right?
Yeah.
Like you come to a location and you should instantly recognize like, oh, this is a location where this was like, I don't know, like an old pig farm, and the farmer, there was a famine, the farmer had to survive, so tried just eating all the pigs, and you can see that immediately, instead of like this little dramatic scene that happened in the family where there was like a dispute and then the wife left or something. Like
Yeah,
that
that's
stuff is
really
like
hard to
way
get
more
across
subtle. Yeah, yeah. Unless you,
without like having stuff, like having like a letter somewhere that you can read as a player, which most people probably don't do anyways.
yeah, exactly. Or it has to be like in the middle of the scene, like in the middle of the table with like a light shining on it or whatever. Like
Yeah, yeah,
really,
yeah.
really specific stuff like that. But it's also super interesting that even myself, like if I'm going through games, there's probably a lot of stuff that I overlook
Yeah.
because I haven't worked on it myself. And as you said, like the artist responsible for those locations is always going to have this personal attachment to it, or like ideally
Totally.
should have this personal attachment to it, where he's like, look, I'm trying to recreate this scene here within all these restrictions. How can I pull that off in the best way while still um, keeping up with gameplay and all the other factors that come in? It's really
Yeah, I mean
interesting.
that's a huge thing as well, right? Yeah, of course you want to do everything to make this location super memorable or super interesting, but then gameplay comes in. Like I was playing Valorant a little bit, the new Riot
Mm-hmm.
Games FPS, and what instantly jumped out at me, which probably doesn't to a lot of players, is that they all their clutter, all their detail, they usually reserve for where the player can't be. So
Yeah.
like it starts like at 2 meters high on the wall, and then the bottom of the wall is pretty clean. And that's I think a lot of people don't notice it, but I because like I don't know, like maybe 1.5 years ago, I was working on a game where that was like in the art bible, and it
Yeah.
said like, okay, this is something you need to look at. No, I don't know, like no vents on the wall where the player can be,
Yeah.
because
Because they want to,
it's gonna.
yeah, they want to keep that visual language intact and just focus on like the level design instead of like the art.
Yeah, and because if it's a competitive game, especially like Valorant is,
Mm-hmm.
it's you can't just have so much clutter on the wall that you can't see the players, right? So it's really important to keep everything clean, keep like the amount of little props to a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. There's always like a trade off, because if you are going to make this location more interesting, then you might have to sacrifice something in like the gameplay or narrative department.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I don't know, if you look at Counter-Strike maps, they're not they're not interesting, right? I mean, not really. There's like, okay, you can see what kind of location it is, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't see, like, I don't know. Have you played Counter-Strike?
Yeah, yeah, I played it for a little bit, like a long while ago. But
Yeah, like,
I think it's like we have these artistic eyes, and for us,
and
like
that's not
those.
yeah, that's not a game that wants to be artistic.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's still what you call it, like Valorant is still pretty, but like
Yeah,
it working within those strict limitations. Like I bet you that the artists working on that game were like, oh shit, we can do this thing here, this thing there, but then they can't do it because
yeah,
level design goes first and like gameplay comes.
totally. Yeah, that's the thing. You have to definitely sacrifice visual interest for playability, especially if the game, like, probably the best Counter-Strike map would be a map that is like just blocks of color, because that's easiest for everyone to know. Can I peek here? Can I do this there?
Yeah,
Whatever. But
super
then,
recognizable.
yeah, but then of course you have to find a good spot in the middle where, like, it's on a spectrum, right? You're either like a game that's beautiful but it's horrible to play,
Yeah,
or you're a bunch of blocks and it plays
because
perfectly.
I was watching some videos recently. We're going on a little bit of a tangent here, but that's fine. I was watching this video about the new skins that they added to the new
Oh my
the new
god.
Counter Strike, and it's like
Yeah,
how they exploit the environment. Because I think
that's great. Yeah.
there was a camo suit that got added, or like a camo pants or whatever, a camo top, and now people are using that to hide in like bushes or like stuff that looks green, and they blend in with
Yep.
that environment. And it's just like, imagine if you're the artist that was like, look, can I please place this bush here? And he was really fighting for that bush. It sounds super stupid, but it probably was like that.
Yeah.
It's like, look, I know this is not going to interfere with any gameplay. Like, he tested it multiple times with different characters and
Yep.
all that skins. And then now with the new update, they add a skin like that. And it's like, oh shit, yeah. My my
Yep.
little asset that I
Yes.
added there fucks up the entire gameplay.
Yeah, I've actually been getting back into Counter Strike a little bit, so I totally know all about this, because they added these new skins for operators, what they call them. So
Yep.
some of them are camo blue, camo green, and there's one map that they just updated. Like they did like a visual update on it, and they added a lot of overgrown foliage and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And on that map, there's some spots where you can definitely hide. And the funny thing is that what they did is, because that's a huge thing is Counter Strike, right? Everything is for sale. Like, the skins cost money, and they don't want to change the skins, because then they're gonna get cheaper, and if they don't get as much like percentages on the market when they're sold, whatever. So what they actually ended up doing was they didn't change the real problem, like the skins, but they actually ended up changing the map
Of course,
for it.
because they're getting money from those skins, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, which is, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure that I agree with that way of going about it, but I mean that's what the money comes from. So I guess that's what
Yeah.
they have to do.
It's exactly. It's like always two sides of the coin, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah, they're doing it
Because
for the
then on the
money,
other
but
hand,
they need the money, right? They need something to
yeah.
fund their games in their future.
Yeah,
And
and on
then
the other hand, is it really gonna piss so many people off if they remove this little overgrown area there and just make it a white background? Probably not.
yeah, exactly. We have other examples in other games too. Like they did an update to Rainbow Six Siege like a while back, like probably 1 or 2 years ago or something, for like
Mhm.
the Chinese market, where they removed all things linked to sexual innuendos. They had like
Okay.
it wasn't like sexuality like only. It was also like gambling. So they had this like casino level in Rainbow Six Siege, and they removed like all the slot machines, and they had like pinup girl neons on the wall, and they like replaced them with other stuff.
Damn.
Yeah, it's crazy. But again, I do want to go back to the overscoping. Like I would be curious how you deal with that personally.
Good question. So for me, it's probably, it used to be one way and now it's a different one. So it used to be I did overscope at the start, and then I would realize it in the middle of working on it, and then I would
Mhm.
either just stop and move on to something else,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I would then have to completely overhaul my whole scene, which isn't that much fun either.
Hmm.
So what I do now is from the start, I do try to start with a block out, even if I might, for example, with the scene I'm currently working on, I started it as like a test for stylized textures,
Hmm.
and then I was like, okay, this is something that I really want to pursue. I want to make a scene out of this, but what? Then I stopped myself and I put down a little block out, and I was like, okay, 3 buildings tops. Then maybe I'll add this. Maybe I'll add this kind of prop and do this and whatever. So
Yeah.
I put down a list and I thought, okay, is this something that I think I can achieve in this amount of time, or is this too much? And I think that
Oh,
is
so
really important.
you actually set a deadline for it too.
It's more like, because I know that probably if I work on it too long, I'm going to lose interest. So that's more
Yeah.
kind of, it's a soft deadline. Let's say it's more like,
Mm.
can I finish this in these amount of months, or is it going to be like I was working on a sci-fi scene a while ago where it's like half done and I just stopped because I was like, sci-fi's boring. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
this is all so clean. I want like some grime. I want some visual interest in it. But it
Hmm.
was a cool scene, and I'd like to finish it someday. But I'm
Yeah, it's
pretty
just
sure it
because
doesn't happen.
you get to recognize like your own pattern of working, right? And like when you're getting bored of a project, and that's only something you get through experience.
Yeah,
You either go that way of like making your project shorter and like really focusing on that, and that works, or there is the other side of it and try to get to love the pipeline itself or like the workflow instead of like focusing on that end result.
yeah, yeah.
But that's something that you can't really do when you're looking for a job in the industry,
That's
because
the thing. So yeah, you have to finish stuff, right? You have to
Mhm.
do it. You can't just fuck around all day and be like, oh yeah, I'm just testing this out.
Yeah, yeah, because that's the way that I solve that issue of overscoping. Like I still downscope at a certain moment,
Hmm.
but I was always heavy into modularity. So I always tend to build these scenes that can be like rejigged as a puzzle and turn into something completely else. Um,
Huh.
so yeah, I always heavily focused on that. So from my end, I always find it super interesting when you do the workflow that you do, or like the more typical workflow, where it's just like, look, I'm gonna build a block out. I'm gonna do these buildings, gonna do this tile, and then I'll just deal with it, because I feel like I start
Yeah.
like really free flowing in a way. where it's like I have my thematic, I have my story that I want to tell, but I always imagine it like super big. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I kind of hurt myself too, because I started in the beginning with the scene that I'm currently working on, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be inspired by Titanfall, especially the tutorial from Titanfall, which is like really dreamy, like really, um, how would you call it, like ethereal. Like it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like the normal world. It feels like something unrealistic.
Yeah.
So that was like my main focus, and then it's sort of got influenced by other ideas. Like I was getting into like hydroponics, and I was doing some research into like renewable energies, and it kind of
Mm.
morphed into like a project that was going to be the combination of all of these things.
Yeah.
Because the initial scene that I had in my mind was like this spherical chamber with like one beautiful tree in the middle, but
Mm.
the sphere itself would be glass, and you could see to the outside where the world was burning.
Oh shit!
to
Damn.
get to get like that
Okay.
to get like that contrast. And this is like sort of like this tree that's on a pedestal for like the last remaining tree that's being preserved.
Yeah,
So
like the little plant in a shoe in Wally.
yeah, something like that.
the last frontier of nature or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm still playing around with those ideas, but that's the thing, like it's something. Maybe I'm starting to realize that I'm not building a scene, I'm building a world. And
Okay.
there's like a difference in that. That's why my projects always take like super long. If well, it's also because I have a ton of other stuff that I'm doing currently.
Of
So
course.
it's starting to realize that my project is not going to be done in like 2 to 6 months. It's going to take me a couple of years before I can push this out. But I think
Yeah.
also if I rely on the modularity part of it, I can just rejig it, make it into a new scene, and then maybe um, add like
Yeah, you can
other
change
other assets to
directions
it. Yeah. I
easily.
can I can add additional assets to it, and it can turn into something else. Like I could take my pipes that I made from my previous scene, and I could turn into like a sort of this blend of like slick sci-fi with the industrial piping going through it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. I guess I'm more rigid in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like working modularly, but a lot of the time I don't want to spend all that time thinking about a ton of modules when I'm just gonna have like 5 camera angles.
Oh
That's when
yeah, for
I
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what I was working on. I did this stylized little fantasy village or whatever. If that was when I was leaving uni to get a job, and I built a whole city, and then I ended up thinking like, well, no one's gonna see this whole city, you know.
Yeah.
I could have just done like a couple houses, made them a little bit more interesting and unique. Even though I do think that was a great exercise
Mm-hmm.
in modularity and kind of learning how to work that way,
Like the
especially like how yeah.
yeah, like the end result that you're showing off is only like 25% of the actual end result you could have been showing off.
Exactly, and that's current scene is like everything's built with like one pivot.
Yeah.
It's not like some props that I'm using. I can copy them around in the engine and stuff, but all
Mm-hmm.
the buildings I'm just gonna use once. I'm gonna make them like with custom decals and
Yeah.
vertex paint and stuff like that. I'm gonna make them really detailed. But yeah, that's the thing. I couldn't just say, okay, I'm gonna change direction completely. That would require a lot of effort. In contrast to your scene, that would probably be like, okay, I could just shuffle these little hallways around and I'll have a completely new thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it really interesting working that way. But yeah, there's no good and bad way of working. Like I would even say that your way of working is more traditional and more typical of what you would expect from people, especially people trying to get into the industry in like the first couple of years, and then it sort of like evolves into something more experimental, I would say, because then
Yeah.
there are people. I'm going to bring up some examples in our studio where there are people working with really experimental stuff with Houdini, like
Mm-hmm.
they're technically still environment artists, so technically they have the same skill set as us. They just choose like, oh look, this is interesting. I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna try out some Houdini, and yeah, I think they're even now trying to mix this with their additional hobby of music. So they're gonna
Oh,
try and blend Houdini in a procedural way with the music that they create.
damn,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, it sounds really interesting, but it's just
Imagine
this.
having like a biome generator that
Oh god.
generates trees and stuff based on the beat of music.
Oh my
That
god, that
could
would
be
be
super
crazy.
interesting. Then you walk through the environment and music plays and every time you pass a tree, there's like a beat or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or
That could be an interesting
oh, that could be
concept.
nice. Yeah, but it's just to reinforce this thing of like most people tend to do the same thing until they get to a place where they can go into the industry,
Hmm.
and then you're already doing that stuff doing your day job. So you might as well like broaden your perspective and like try to reach out for like new skills.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do with my scene as well. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I would say I'm comfortable in doing, like modeling and texturing props and making like materials for vertex painting and doing that kind of like workflow for structures and buildings. But then I'm trying to incorporate stuff that I haven't done before, like little VFX and I don't
Yeah,
know. I have this particle system where there's like leaves floating through the air and twirling around and stuff like that. And that's super interesting because that's I've never tackled that before, and I'm starting to do foliage, which I've at none of the projects I worked for I was doing foliage,
hmm
so that's kind of a new thing for me as well. Like, just dipping your toes into different things, and I think that's really important to keep yourself keep yourself interested as well, because if you're doing the same thing you're doing at work, then it might get a little bland at some point, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another good thing that I constantly think about is my personal work sort of depends on what I do in the office too.
100%.
So from let me give an example. So there are moments when I get to do like some prop work, for
Yeah.
example, and then you go home. You don't want to be working on props anymore. You just want to be building stuff. And then it could be the other way around. Like this is a really simple example where you're
Yeah,
like building stuff in the engine at work, and then you go home and you get to spend time on props.
I agree 100%. It's a lot of the time it's the same for me. Like, I started working on my gun um when I was still in Spain, and I was working on a modular set for something. I
Yeah,
was like, this is fun doing this, getting all the textures to line up with the modules, and doing these intense UVs and snapping everything, thinking about a lot of measurements, whatever, and a lot of use cases. But then
yeah, yeah,
sometimes at home, I was like, I just want to make a gun that looks kick ass,
yeah.
and
Like
that's
like
it.
purely focus on the art of it instead of like all the technicals and the
Yes.
metrics and yeah.
Yeah, jump back into ZBrush, just sculpt a little bit of cool wood or whatever.
hmm
That's something that I totally need, is that contrast of not having the same thing that you're doing at home doing it
Yeah,
at
yeah,
work, or
yeah. Definitely.
yeah.
I think it's those things that you only find out once you get into the industry and you're like, oh shit, I can do all this other stuff too. Because now I'm doing the stuff that I wanted to do for like 8 hours a day. So you kind of have this satisfaction that you're getting the skills anyway during those 8 hours. And
Hmm.
then you can spend your free time just learning some new stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing, because yeah, like we said before, right? It's you're not job. You don't need to show, hey, I'm comfortable in doing this. This is what you should hire me for. It's more like, hey, what about this? This seems cool. Can I try this out? Because you've got that safe position. You've got your job. You're already. Yeah, that's also a thing why I don't feel bad not working at home sometimes, because I know I've already done this for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm I'm good for today.
hmm that's why I also enjoy all this other stuff that I'm doing right now. Like I'm doing a lot of management stuff for the site. I'm looking into automation. I'm currently setting up like a weekly newsletter. All that stuff is just so vastly different from each other that it's
Hmm.
easy for me to just jump in between those because I'm like, okay, like this short thing is done. I can jump onto something else and just have like
Yeah.
this totally different mindset.
Yeah, I actually wonder what it is for me that sometimes I'm not interested at all in personal work. Like
Mm,
right now, I, I, I don't know. I'm just really not like. There's no itch in my fingers that's like, okay, I need to get going. And
yeah.
sometimes I'll be on my way home from work and I can't wait to just sit down and start working.
Yeah, not even on the way home. Just like the entire day at work is just like, oh, can I please go home?
Yeah, that's it. I totally have that as well. And then I'll be like, I have to stop myself because I know I have to go to bed soon, and just like, okay, this is done. This is done. I'm going
Yep.
to bed. I'm not working on this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It can hurt your sleep for sure.
Yeah, but that's what I love too. Is that it's such a for me? It's such a it's just my passion, man. I just love it, and I'm so happy that I found something that I can
Mm,
do.
yeah.
Like, I love it so much that even though I do it 40 hours a week, I still want to do it at home. Maybe not all the time, but still a good amount of time, and that's something that I'm so grateful for. I mean, yeah, it's man, it's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was this interesting question posed to me like a while back, where it was like, um, if how should I put this? Like, if some aspects of this would change, like imagine the amount of money that you get, or
Hmm.
the people that you work with. Like, would you still be doing the same thing? And it's like, yeah, like I've been doing this for, like you said, like 40 hours a week, and then I go home and do additional stuff on top of that, like within
Yeah.
the same thing. Like, this is the thing that I love to do. Like, I'm not gonna stop this.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing too, right? I mean, there's probably different jobs that we both could make a lot more money in,
Yeah.
but why? Why? What is an extra? I don't know, 800 euros a month, whatever it is, right? What
Hmm.
is this extra money to waking up every day and feeling shitty about your job? I don't ever want to have that where I wake up in the morning and I'm like, man, I gotta go to work again. Fuck this. I just want to stay home. And I'm so happy that yeah, like I mean, it's a cliche, right? This whole thing about if you like what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's not entirely true because I definitely feel, I definitely feel
I
if I've
was,
worked.
I was just about to
I'm
say, yeah.
yeah, I'm happy that I have these couple days off now. Um, but I'm not. I don't feel like terrified of starting again in a week. You know, it's not like, oh
Hmm.
God, I have to do this shit again.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's I'm looking forward to something, and especially if you're working on a cool project, then you have something
yeah,
else to look forward to as well, right? Is
yeah.
to
I
finally showing
also,
it to people.
yeah, oh yeah, that's gonna be nice, man.
Oh,
I also do want to add that it's not all, what do you call it, like pink flowers and whatever.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there are certain moments when like an entire week can be like, fuck, man, like this was not a good week. Like I've certainly had those moments, but
same, yeah,
then
definitely,
you just have to zoom out for a little bit and just realize that this is still something you love to do. And especially
yeah,
in this case, like when we're all sitting at home, the thing that this also made me realize is that I really like the work, but I love the people that I work with even more. Like just
yes,
getting inspired by other people and like seeing their work and like constantly having these like super small daily talks and just talking about like for instance your personal work, when I would just approach you and talk like, hey, how's your personal work going? Like
yeah,
those little things, they're like super fun because I'm always interested in like what everyone else is doing, and like everyone had like their cool crazy thing going on and like their personal life that they don't really um that they're not really vocal about. Like I know that like my stuff is really out there. I post a lot on social media and whatever. So everyone
mm,
kind of knows what I'm doing, but I never knew what other people were doing in their free time.
yeah, yeah. And not even just that. I also love the collaborative part of working with level designers, with I don't know, different
Mm,
what do you call it, uh, departments.
yeah.
So that's something I actually didn't have that much when I was working in outsourcing. I also like that because you could just like you sit down at your desk and you just do your thing for the day, which can be really nice. But I found out that I do really like having to communicate, having meetings about stuff, thinking about more of a bigger picture, and not just sitting at the desk and like modeling this for 8 hours, which can be fun, but it's like you said, it's really cool because you also learn things about other people or about what they do. So I've learned a lot of stuff about level design since I've started. You just because I work with level designers every day, and I have to think I have to think about what they're doing, and they have to think about what I have to do, and it's kind of this symbiotic relationship almost,
Yeah.
and that's an aspect of the job that I really enjoy, and it is missing a little bit now that we're working from home. But of course, you still need to keep up that communication because
it's
it
different.
is one of the most important.
Like
parts.
it feels less fluid. Like it's in the office we had like this really collaborative like environment, and you could just like walk up to anyone in the office and ask them questions. And now it's a little bit more tricky because you don't have these spontaneous moments when I will be walking through the office and see like someone working on something cool and be like, "Hey, what is this?" Like,
Yeah,
and then you don't
have
have
to
those
seek it out.
moments. Yeah, exactly.
You have to make the conscious decision to be like, "Hey, can I call you for a second?" Yeah, it's there's this threshold that you have to pass before you start communicating, because you're not just constantly in the same room walking about and being like, "Oh, that is nice. What are you working on there?" Or now if I want to ask somebody to help me or to look over something, or if they want to ask me for feedback, they need to do it a little bit more officially, let's say, through some kind of means of communication, instead of just coming over to my desk and be like, "Hey, can you just come over here for a second and just look at what I've been doing?" Or like just like tap me on the shoulder because they're sitting next to me. That's not happening anymore.
Yeah. Like the simple thing of like, "Hey, can we have a call?" feels way more official than, like you said, like just tapping someone on the shoulder.
Yeah, totally.
All right, man. What do you think? Should we cut this one off here?
Sure, man.
Feels like we talked
Yeah, it
a
was
lot
like,
of
I
topics.
think yeah. I think it was more or less cohesive though. There's like a red, what is it? A red
thread going through the whole thing.
Yeah. The red thing.
The red thing.
the red thing is going through the whole thing. It's fine.
All right, man.
Yeah, no,
it was good chatting about this. Like I feel like we can expand on so many of the topics that we discussed today.
Totally. It's super interesting to see how we're doing the same job essentially, but we do handle a lot of stuff differently because we have different focuses, right? Like you were more of a modular environment kind of guy. I really enjoy some nice hard surface modeling and some cool zebra stuff and whatever. We each have our own passions, I'd say, even though we do have the same job description, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really interesting to see, like, coming back to the topic of like getting to know everyone in the office, like especially the artist, and you just see their backgrounds. Like, there's a lot of people that are into music too, and they play like really beautifully, but you don't get to know that if you don't have like these personal connections.
Yeah, I might actually. Before I went to Spain, I lent a friend of mine my MIDI keyboard and my drum pad, and now that I'm back here, he just gave it back to me. He came over with the mask and everything, and he brought me my keyboard, and I've got my saxophone here as well. So I might actually also start doing some little music as well, because that is something that is a completely different creative outlet. Sometimes can also help you unwind and just do something else, but still be active creatively and creating something.
Yeah. Maybe make some sweet intro music with that saxophone for the podcast.
Oh shit! God damn!
All right, man. This was a really nice chat. I'm looking forward to the next ones.
Yeah, man. Totally.
All right. Well, see ya, dude.
See ya.
So that's going to do it for today, people. Hope you enjoyed our little chat. We will continue to improve the audio quality and the structure of this podcast going forward. If you're looking for more resources to help your journey as an environment artist, you can head on over to the website, which is linked into the description below, where you will find more stuff like the weekly blog, tips and tricks, and much more. But that's going to do it from our side. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who made this possible. See ya!